Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another 3 at 3 with Mrs. Milk. Today, we're joined by Kate Carmichael, who's a consultant with Edinburgh-based consultancy Remarkable. Thank you for joining us, Kate. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do with Remarkable?
Sure. It's so good to be here, and thank you for the invitation. So let's see, where do I begin? I've been working with Remarkable since 2014. We used to be called Investors in People Scotland, and we had to change our name when we realized that it less and less reflected all of the great things that we were doing. So we became Remarkable with the ambition, lofty ambition of trying to make organizations and their people remarkable, something that we're really proud to keep trying to do. And we do that through a few things. So I am a certified intent-based leadership pioneer, teaching leaders and organizations how to change how they operate so that they are going from lots of industrial revolution style practices to something that's a bit more fit for purpose for this knowledge economy we're all operating in. And then I'm also a certified fearless organization practitioner working on creating psychological safety in organizations. So more than 25 years of experience in leadership and organizational development. I've worked across lots of different industries, almost predominantly in the private sector until I got into consulting. And now I work with organizations across not-for-profit, public, and private sectors.
That's wonderful, Kate. Thank you so much for that. And today we are going to be talking about your fearless organizational work, which is also called in psychological safety, which you may notice that we're talking about a fair bit about on social and everywhere else at the moment. So in your experience, how can you tell when an organisation is in need of psychological safety indexing, and how does a company know? What are the signs?
Yeah, great question. And I suppose the nice thing is there are so many different paths that can take an organization to come and want to improve upon their psychological safety. So our focus is primarily on teams and within teams and looking at that context, but we also can work with organizations as a whole. What might bring them to us? There's a list of things, and I think it's almost helpful to start out by just describing what are the core elements of psychological safety, if you'll humor me.
Definitely, that would be cool.
I love Amy Edmondson's list. Really briefly, she'll say, it's the belief that we're not going to get punished or humiliated if we speak up. But she's got a broader list, and that is that if you make a mistake, it won't be held against you personally. That if something's wrong, you can bring it up without that being used against you. That it doesn't matter where ideas came from. You don't need to make sure it's attributed to you, as long as those ideas help the team. That if you need help, you can ask for it without that being, used against you. People saying, oh, well, I guess you're not up to this job. That you can change your mind, and people will actually be impressed with that humility that, taking on board new information, you can shift your thinking. When you make a decision, it's based on what's in the best interest of the whole team rather than what's going to personally support your progression. And that when people do things, we assume positive intent, that we assume that people's actions were being done with great aims rather than with something malicious. So with that kind of as the backdrop, here are some of the reasons why people might come to us, why leaders might come and say, we think psychological safety could be a good thing for us to explore. So the first thing is they could say, we've got this team, but they're not very collaborative. They are this collection of individuals, and it feels like we're missing all these opportunities to bring those minds together and have them work on something as a whole. They could say that increasingly in our industry, if we're not creative and innovative, we're going to get left behind, and we just don't seem to be doing that kind of stuff. What's stopping us? They could say it feels like we could have higher performance or we could be more productive, but something seems to be getting in the way. Or and I'm not going to necessarily get it right, but I saw that there was a Gallup poll that was done within the last couple of years that was saying 80% or more of employees are disengaged. 80% or more, and this is just growing. So engagement, if you've got people who are just turning up and doing the bare minimum, they just don't participate. You say, what questions are there? And there's tumbleweed. You've got a revolving door, where turnover is just sapping your resource. again, psychological safety can help to support that.
I think, I think you hit on a really good point, which is, you know, it's almost like most people would expect this stuff to just be a part of, you know, the exchange that employees have with employers, and
yep.
you know, most people would expect that level of support within an organization. And the sad truth is, unless there's intent behind it to actually develop it, it doesn't just spring up on its own.
Yeah, indeed.
You know, and I think especially in the kind of current climate of things like quiet quitting, you know, it's really important for leaders and organizational leaders to kind of look in themselves really, and look at kind of what being fair to the people around them. Everybody thinks it's a great place to work, but if you're missing those fundamental points around being able to speak up, being able to highlight things that are wrong, being able to change your mind, that's massive.
Yeah. Well, in the quiet quitting, I'm so glad you brought that up. What's the thing that drives people to get to that place where there's apathy, you know, where they're showing up because they need that paycheck, but they're just not going to stick their neck out. And so it's things like, you know, the care can be just too stressful, or this onslaught of change. They're just feeling less and less resilient. It is slowly deteriorating their capacity to drive activity at work. So resilience is another reason. Another one that seems to be popping up increasingly, which is great, is organizations are saying, well, we need to have this inclusion and diversity strategy in place. And I know with psychological safety that you can have a strategy in place, but if you don't have the practices in place that mean you're actually being inclusive, to say, if we don't hear from you, we're not going to be making the best decisions. So how do you get all of those things in place so you're really tapping into the diverse thinking and capabilities people have? I mean, that's just a short list, but basically, I've said this to a few other people, there are few metrics or KPIs that you could throw at me where I couldn't say that psychological safety wouldn't improve on them. So it comes from us, so many different directions.
And I think for us, you know, I think for everybody post-pandemic, you know, people's resilience is just so much, it's so much sheerer than it used to be, you know, because we've just all been through, you know, a pandemic. There's, you know, people dying in the streets. So it's like, you know, I think it's time for change. And, you know, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, and there are people like yourselves and This Is Milk that are pushing that psychological safety kind of agenda, if you want to call it something.
Yeah.
So just kind of on that piece around, you know, leaders needing to kind of look in on themselves and really be quite honest with the organizations that they're helping to kind of shape. You know, how do you convince leaders to invest in PSI, psychological safety indexing?
Yep. So I was thinking about this question a little bit, and the short answer is I cannot always convince a leader that this is the best path to take, that this would be useful for them. And so I know that there's certain things I need to listen out for when I'm first talking to a leader, and then try to draw out from them what's really going on. So how do I convince them? I suppose the first thing is I need to hear what they think needs to happen, because they'll usually come in saying, you know, hey, here's the issue and here's the solution. And if I don't hear them including themselves, if I hear them saying, well, I need our managers and people to do this stuff, we've got an issue. If I hear them say, we've got a problem and we need to do something about this, then I know I'm working with an opportunity that has real potential. So I need to be hearing that. The other thing is I want to try to go in and be as curious as I can and understand what problems are that they're facing. So I can hold up the mirror back to them and say, you know, these are the things that you've just been talking about. I know that psychological safety is able to do something to address this, to help improve the situation for you. And from there, what are the things I can do? I can share with them some of the research if I think that would be helpful. I can share with them testimonials from clients that we've got. But I can also try to understand where is their reticence, you know, and how, therefore, can I help to address that? Some leaders, for instance, might feel concerned about the path or journey they're going to have to take. So how can I take them on that and have them feel like they've got the right support in place at the right times? For instance, I think if we're going to try to create greater psychological safety, leaders need to feel okay to practice vulnerability.
Absolutely. And I think, to be supportive as an employee, kind of be supportive that, leaders are also people. They've also been through everything that the rest of the world, and they're trying to keep teams and try and rebalance the ship after so much disruption. So, I think being open and, listening to where they're coming from is really important. And just in kind of on that, in terms of, not that I want you to use any names or anything, but what type of pushback do you get from companies and leaders? And, feel free to use any kind of examples that you have.
Well, a most common pushback that I'll get from a leader is not direct pushback. Rather, it is them saying, we will do this if that's what the people want. And so cue us going out and finding out, is this what the management team or the employees would like? And we swiftly get back, yes, this would be fantastic. And I've had in multiple cases leaders say, well, maybe I need to reframe that question, or I've got to dig a bit deeper to really make sure that people understand what it was I was asking. And if I'm being a bit cheeky, my view with that sometimes is, I wonder if they were hoping to get a different answer, and that if they ask the question in new and different ways, they'll get the answer they were seeking. They didn't really want to do this and were hoping that they'd found a nice out. And so I try to.
That is interesting. Yeah, that kind of, we've considered it. Move on. I think it's something that's quite interesting, just from my own kind of personal perspective. Often when you take this question to teams, they just say, more resource, please. We just need more resource. And but in a slightly broken culture, where people feel like they're working in silos and they're not able to bring their true self to work, then you're just throwing more resource at a problem that is deeper than just, obviously workload is something that we all struggle with.
Yeah.
But like just throwing resource and having the same old kind of conversations aren't always going to fix the problems that are kind of deeply rooted in organizations.
And I don't mean, I love the leaders I get a chance to work with, even the ones who are saying, hey, maybe we should go and check this again. I know.
Incredibly brave to open themselves up like that.
Indeed. But also the people who are most likely distanced from knowing what employees experience are the ones who are at the top of an organization. They are less likely to experience, for instance, what it is like to be at the bottom of a power gradient. And so because they've got that distance, and because they might not be aware of the impact their really positive intentions might be having on people, there can be a bias that's created, or a deafness to what people are experiencing. They're so focused on these are wonderful positive intentions of doing these things, that they're not aware that the what it is like in reality for people, it could be very different.
Psychological safety initiatives can be difficult to embed. They can be difficult to maintain. They do require, tinkering and constant attention on them. Really, are we living to those values? And it's incredibly important in a kind of journey that lots of organizations are going through right now, from the help of your good selves.
Yeah. So said that well. Yeah.
That's us at the end of our 3 questions, our 3 at 3 this week. Kate, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to put some details on how you could follow Kate on LinkedIn, and some details are about Remarkable at the end of this video. But I just want to say thanks again for joining us. It was a really great conversation.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Take care.